Prudence Arceneaux, Chair of Creative Writing. I thought tonight would be a good time to talk about like the journey of creative writing. This event itself is really amazing in that it allows people to show up here with their support networks. We don't all get that. So it's good to see people with their families and with their friends who are here to offer that kind of support. I'm gonna tell you a story, because that's what writers do. My mother was a telephone operator with Southwestern Bell. That ages, right? My dad was a diesel mechanic working on big rigs and locomotive engines. I was the second child, the last child, quirky and odd and unusual, and there was a lot of like, why'd we do this when I showed up? And it wasn't a surprise necessarily that I said I wanted to do something creative, like writing, but it was definitely a fight, an uphill battle. I turned out to be smart. I turned out to be a critical reader and thinker, and their argument was, if you have all those skills, why don't you go into law? Why don't you do something productive? And it took a long time to get them to understand that productive was something that was going to better society. Writing, art, music, all of those things better society. I would argue I'm still fighting with my mom. My dad never came to see me read. He never read my stuff. So I don't know if he understood what I was doing, but he did see I was happy. So when we're here, I'm grateful to see the support networks that writers have. As artists, our society says that we should just create, and we aren't often given encouragement or appreciation. So to know that our families and our friends are here to support us means everything. So if you're here with a writer, with a creative person, continue to support them. Yeah, there will be times when they seem extremely odd, and it's okay. Just go with it, right? We are trying in our own way to make a path for other people, to create a space for all of us to express ourselves in all the ways that we can. And I want you to know that if you're thinking about taking classes because you want to continue this, ACC is the place to do that, right? Creative writing, dance, music, art, photography. We are here to support you and to help you to create community, to make sure that you can continue to create your art. So if you find that maybe you haven't created your own community, ACC is a wonderful place to start to do that. So when I started this and I said I wanted to offer kind of the journey of the writer, this is what I want to do. We're going to start with a writer who is currently here with us, right? Who is a student in a number of our classes and is currently editing the Rio Review. And then we're going to hear from a student who was here before the world fell apart and then during that, and has now taken that next step, right? Gone on to an MFA, has moved into that world of sticking with the writing and pushing it out into the world, and just defended the thesis, so is actually MFA now. And then the third part of our journey will be Eli, who is a current instructor, right? Having gone through bachelor's, master's, right? And studied with a number of different writers, in some sense to show people, like, we can survive. We won't end up in dire straits, and that what we do is something that helps to create foundation for others. So first, I would like to call up Divya, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Divya Goruganthu, and as my former professor said, yes, I am a student currently at ACC, and right now I'm in one of the courses in which we edit the Rio Review, which is ACC's literary journal. So over the course of the semester, myself and my fellow editors read 187 entries from students at ACC. And it was a really tough decision narrowing it down, but we are kind of now in the home stretch of getting everything published and everything. And that was really amazing to see all the work that all the students across ACC have submitted and what everybody else was doing, and to like kind of just see their own perspectives. So I was also asked to read a poem today. I'm really excited to say this one is getting published not in the RIA Review, but in a different journal that I do not know the name of currently. It's called Washed Up. Heavy on the floor of a river, devoid of any movement, impervious to the ebbs and flows of famine, fire, floods, settled among the sediment, content to let it all wash over. No tension, terror, or tremor to cause tired toes to tremble. All around and above, life continues to course. Each beleaguered breath blown sinks deeper into a riverbed home. All around and surrounding, duties attempt a jostling. Old leaves, stones, twigs, and branches, useless to rouse these weary bones. Here to rest as the world moves past, a loggy placed for a washed-out body, content to ignore what is, all above and surrounding, each bleary breath blown. Thank you.
I have a question for you, though. Why ACC creative writing?
Great question. Yeah, so I think my journey into writing is very, very strange. So I think my mom's right here. Shout out to my mom. And I honestly didn't really see myself as a writer at all growing up. My mom can attest to the fact that I almost failed English class in 10th grade. And I just kind of figured that this kind of stuff wasn't really for me, but I came to it later in life just to try it out. Like, I was just gonna take a class, see what happened. I figured nothing would actually come of this because, again, I almost failed 10th grade English. So I just tried it out, and what I discovered was this kind of process of writing is completely different to a normal English class, much to my happiness. I think what I can say to anybody who's struggling is to kind of just try again and try it from a different point of view. Like, I think my English class was very rigid in structure and kind of a lot about, well, what does this author mean about this, and less so focused on the actual creative development of things. And just as in K through 12 education, there's unfortunately a lot of cuts to the arts, so there wasn't really a place for me to explore that. But thankfully, I was able to explore it here, and it's been great.
I often tell my students that I am really happy when I can convince them to walk away from another field of study and to decide to be writers. Because Divya, you are a scientist at your core, right? Yeah. So the first works that we read were very scientific, and I was like, you can do all kinds of things with that. You can make some magic happen. Thank you for sharing with us. The next writer, as I said, has just finished the MFA program, although you said you have one more paper. Yeah, one more paper. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. Please help me welcome Brian.
Okay, well, I'll say that you're 2 for 2 in converting people from other fields into writing. And I'll talk about my experience as to what brought me here and maybe preempt the question you asked, Divya. But I got my undergraduate degree in finance, so I've made quite a big pivot, with maybe something in mind that your parents might have had in terms of like applying whatever skills I thought I had in high school or whatever to something practical, because I didn't know any better. And then I worked in that field for a while, and I began to take, just for fun, various like arts classes at ACC because it was accessible and it was affordable. And I started out with like visual arts classes, drawing and painting, and even a ballet class, an art history class. And writing seemed sort of distant and intimidating, weirdly, more so than these other things. And I think the reason for me, at least, for that was that I didn't know how these successful creative writers, whether they're poets or novelists, and poetry has become what I've focused on, were able to do what they could with like this toolkit that seemed like I seemed like I already had. Like I had a vocabulary, and so they're doing these things whereas something like painting felt like a blank slate. I of course I don't know how to paint. I've never done it before, and so that for whatever reason that made writing extra intimidating. But my previous classes at ACC, I suppose, gave me the courage to dip my toes in creative writing, and I ended up taking 3 classes here before from right before the pandemic through the pandemic, 2 of them with Prudence, and then I applied to MFA schools and have spent like the last 3 intense years of my life doing that. And so that's what brought me to ACC, and it was a great experience that felt accessible. It felt welcoming. It felt like such a diverse group of people. There were people that were, I think, still in high school even taking these creative writing classes, to people like me doing it as like for fun thing, to people taking it for credit, to people at all walks of life. And so it felt communal, and that's it kind of ushered me into a communal experience of grad school. So yeah, I'll read a couple poems, and then if there's anything else you want me to talk about, I will try. This one's called Almost a Sonnet. I was up to the edge of my mind in dirt, with an eye out to find for my hands a similar filth, more nourishing, more perishing than seeing the world in sludge gray without touching the sludge. Several times I'd worked so hard to be almost in love, but the poem that lives too far inside its own head, but like the poem that lives too far inside its own head, I could never do more than love the idea of it, touch it in thought, but not in flesh. So imagine the miracle, a love free of the mind's strangles, but left behind in a hanging garden of exhaust to swallow. It is better to have tasted it, better perhaps to have not gotten there the earliest, than in not remaining the headiest or the emptiest, I might become, if not the steadiest, then the dirtiest. I'll do one more. This one is called Continuity, and this is kind of a weird one. I should probably say, because it's not obvious, that this poem doesn't have the letter E in it, except for one obvious place. So that was the kind of constraint here. Continuity. Today I was circling back to a draft which had, as its constraint, an omission of ease. It was about continuity. Before it to work, it had to construct an instinct of how it would braid, lightly but not idly. It couldn't point out that which was lacking, and not just at first, but for its duration. I had its basic calculus down, but was missing anything that was at all mildly amusing, and not just in a way that would bring you to laugh, but in a way that might spawn an aha, as if coming upon a bit of lost folk wisdom. I would show it to Nadia, who would want to point out what was missing, and I would show it to Harold, who would say that I'm too ambitious for my own good. But this is a world in which ambition isn't always obliging, and although I don't much worry about it, I still aim to pass from point to point in a way that is familiar. And it is this conflation of two dissimilar things, ambition and constraint, that stirs a capacity for transformation that a blah thought in my mind might morph into a blah word to carry in my hand. And possibly a blah ablution will follow, or it might not. But what is living without an occasional shot of vodka to cloud your way through it?
The thing that I've always appreciated about Brian as a writer is if you say that there is something complicated, Brian's going to do it. You say like, oh no, this form, it's got too much stuff, and everything's okay. And then 2 weeks later, Brian's done it. Like, I appreciate that. The next part of our journey, Eli, I don't even know what to say about you. Again, every parent's fear is that your child won't be able to make something out of the art. And I think often people, when they say make something, they're thinking Madonna, Lady Gaga, right? And they forget that we can art and live as people and be in the spaces with everyone else. And so we're using Eli as that third part of the journey, right? And a reminder, it's not the end of it. It's just a new manifestation of it. Please help me welcome Eli.
Thank you. So quick, not warning, just welcome to a kind of a creepy horror space. I'm a horror writer. What I'm reading tonight, I would probably put on the same level of, I don't know, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, like that level, a little PG-13 action. So I want to say that out loud before I read it, and now I'm just going to read it. This is called The Survivors Club. Nobody understands kid funerals the right way. I've been to a few. I used to say I never wanted kids because of the Mojave Desert and its knife-leaved plants and vicious sun and constant barrage of sand and wind was a hard place to try to grow up. I used to say that, and then I had Jared. Suddenly I understood why the finger leaves on the Joshua trees were so sharp. It was because there was nothing too sharp or serrated or serious or cruel to defend my son with. I felt a kinship with Joshua and Yucca, the violent stewards of the desert, when I held Jared and I sang to him, ushering him through his first minutes in the world with mostly on-key songs I was hoping to make sure he grew up loving. But being a kid in this accidental desert town meant some things. It meant dreading summer because it was an eviction from somewhat air-conditioned classrooms with other kids. Summers out of school were 3 months of desolate erosion. Going outside was punishment under the vicious weight of the sun. That was obvious, though, about that horrific span of sand we dared to call a part of California. People knew about the hell of summer. What they didn't know about was the Survivors Club. Being a kid here meant knowing too much about kid funerals. I went to my first when I was 10. What I remember most about the funeral is how much I hated the suffocating itch of cheap formal clothes and how much fun Kevin would have had making fun of me in them if he wasn't lying in the box in the center of a ring of slack-faced kids and relieved adults. My father might have looked the most relieved. He'd told me I could go on that lake trip when Kevin invited me. My mom refused to allow it, and when the call came that somehow Kevin's family had ended up off the road in a car-mangling ditch, the back seat, the one Kevin was in, the one I would have been in, tangled around and through a post and barbed wire fence wired hot for angry cattle, my father couldn't look at my mother. Her mouth said sad words, but her eyes were all the way I told you so. I never knew why she said no. Because I said so did a lot of work in that conversation. She'd grown up in that desert too, and sometimes her words were as sharp as the stubby cacti outside. Then there was Jen. I was 14 when she said the first dirty thing anyone had ever said to me. I'd been surprised someone in my grade was bold enough to talk like that. I was still hanging on to that portal of a memory a year later when her boyfriend shot her on his porch because she'd said something she knew was too young, because she'd said she knew she was too young for what he wanted. And then he was failing Spanish, and he was supposed to be helping with that, wasn't he? That was his testimony anyway. I didn't really know what to wear to her funeral. That same year, a kid from my grade I'd hung around a few times was found leathery and not quite hidden under a scraggly juniper bush out in hiker country. The knife wounds in his chest were full of sand, is how my mind's eye sees it. At the funeral, his mother sat next to the hole in the ground, knees spread wide, her left elbow anchored in her left thigh and her face hidden in that left hand. Her right hung onto the folding chair she'd be given to sit in while what was left of her son was lowered into the ground. She made sounds people don't make, ever. City funerals probably don't sound like that, can't sound like that. takes open space and an unfeeling sky, a view of the San Gabriel Mountains with their moderate beauty mocking the dead for a sound like that to find its strength. 2 more in high school, one of them a twin whose face afterward had no color, eyes no soul when his brother was gone. Another hit by a car out on the soft blacktop while hoofing it the couple miles between her house and the only city bus in town. At some point, I'd laughed with both of them. Just after high school, Scott the non-believer, who laughed when I told him I didn't think any of those other kids had ever been to a funeral. I couldn't know for sure, right? But I'd been thinking. I'd been figuring it out, maybe. But then Scott said, look, you're an anomaly, an outlier. Call yourself a survivor, sure, but this isn't a club. I haven't been to a funeral, didn't know any of those people or anyone else who's died just yet, and look at me, doing just fine. You already know what happened next. I'd been right. Years passed, I became a parent, and then I forgot. Jared, whose infant cries were gentle and pleading, whose toddler terribleness was underpinned by the purest joy of being you could ever dream up, whose first and second grade classes were full of kids whose parents looked like a collection of the mistakes the kids had yet to make, Jared made me forget for a minute. One of his classmates was familiar to me, rather, one of the mothers. One of his classmates' mothers was someone I'd seen at a few funerals lifetimes ago and even chatted with afterwards, in the quick-hearted way curious teenagers chat when emotions and hormones potion up together. Eliza, another member of the club. She nodded at me after an after-school creativity fair, the kind of thing that would normally just be called babysitting, with crayons and pipe cleaners if it didn't need school approval. Long time, I said, not sure which was the last funeral. They blur together. He been to one yet? She gestured toward my Jared, who sat sharing a large sheet of butcher paper with a few other kids. A child with a smaller, softer version of Eliza's face sat at his elbow. They giggled together. Jared, I told her, and no. Mine's Oliver. Then she sighed, and I thought that sound meant Oliver hadn't been either. The space between us filled with the question. It was always there. I think both thinking at the same time brought it home to us. Will it be theirs? The silence asked. When Jared shrieked in pain and maybe even more in shock at the scissors somehow sticking out of his chest and Oliver's tiny hand, white-knuckled, glued to their handle, Oliver's dark eyes looked as deep and old with mistakes as his mother's, Jared's face glimmered with tears. The wet shine broken into gemstone shards, each facet a shimmering accusation of what I didn't protect him from, what I didn't do to make him a member, what his friend's mother had the foresight to teach her son to do. I hadn't wanted kids because I didn't want to explain their friends' funerals to them, because of course my kids would be survivors if I had them. Even in the desert, I guess sometimes you get what you wish for. The only funeral Jared ever went to was his own. I know how the desert funeral sounds are made now. It wasn't the desert's open spaces that does it. It was me. I made them because there was a way out for Jared that I didn't take, that Eliza taught Oliver to take. Maybe that's what a mother's strength is supposed to be. Maybe Eliza taught Oliver with because I said so, hoping Oliver would stop asking why he had to do such an ugly thing. Oliver was remanded to inpatient psychiatric care, and I wondered if he was going to get to keep his membership dues up to date. Seems as good a place as any to manufacture a funeral when you need one. I don't know if that's how it actually works, if you need to keep going to them so that the funeral isn't yours. I don't know anything anymore, really, except you're either the kid in the box or the kid wondering what it's like to die before you're even 12. But I don't think Jared was a random choice. I think Eliza thought I'd somehow understand more than another parent, like I knew Jared's funeral was saving all the kids who went to it, making them members. I have to admit she was right. Doesn't make the songs Jared and I don't get to sing together any easier. What no one understands about kid funerals is sorrow takes a back seat at those things. It's not the strongest emotion there, the one every set of parents but one feels when they get to load the car and buckle car seats and ignore the whining protests that rise when they drive past a McDonald's without even slowing down. No one ever says it out loud, but it's the same at every funeral, same at Jared's. It's a relief as invasive as a mouthful of table sugar. I'm going to think of that as Jared's gift. They get to feel that relief at every funeral because of Jared. You're welcome, I guess. Here you go.
And that's a new piece?
That's brand new.
Like last 5 hours?
You know, did you say that
Nice. Nice. I've appreciated so I don't read horror or watch horror. So I've appreciated this kind of new trend in the writing, like the Who Survives, the Last Girls Club, that kind of thing. So I like that. I look forward to reading it on the page. that's our journey for writers. I'm trying not to sound really sappy. Those who know me know it doesn't happen very often, but I'm thinking about it right now. But since I'm being recorded, I'm going to hold on to that. I want to thank you all again as family and friends and supporters of creative people. More of you coming in now. It is amazing to see you here. It's amazing to see you in support of these young writers. It's amazing to see people still understanding the importance of art in our world. I hope you continue that fight. I hope you continue to help your creative people make creative works, and I hope that you continue to be creative in the world as well. Thank you so much for your time.